Governor Greg Abbott has asked 3 state agencies to tackle what he calls pornography and inappropriate content in public schools. He pointed to examples of 2 books found in school libraries, one on gender identity and another about abusive lesbian relationships. But the request comes as a growing number of conservatives raise questions over what is being taught in schools. Politics reporter Daniel Marin looks closer at the governor's order and why the effort could pay off politically.
Governor Abbott is amping up his push to remove what he sees as obscene content in Texas public schools. In a letter sent Monday, the governor asked the Texas Education Agency, along with its governing body, the State Board of Education, and the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, which oversees library programming, to, quote, immediately develop statewide standards to prevent the presence of pornography and put in place a process for parents and community members to, quote, vet school and library materials. In his letter, the governor specifically cited the book In the Dream House, which depicts an abusive lesbian relationship. We spoke with the author last spring after the book was removed by Leander ISD after complaints by parents.
I would hope that they would value their kids and their kids' lives and health and safety over their squeamishness.
Conservative issues like the content of curriculum, particularly along racial, gender, sexuality lines in public schools, has become a flashpoint for conservatives who are likely to vote in primary.
James Henson with UT Austin's Texas Politics Project notes the governor's letter came days before the filing period begins for the March primary. And this time around, Abbott does have some GOP opponents, and he has an approval rating hovering at 43%. At this point before the 2018 election, his rating was 48%.
The governor is attentive to what his primary base wants. And very attentive to not letting anybody else who is or might get in the governor's race get to the right of him on the issue.
Daniel Marin joins us now. Now, the governor cited 2 books in his request, but parents and politicians are pushing a longer list. What else are they focusing on?
Well, State Rep Matt Krause from Fort Worth, who is also running for Attorney General, he has compiled a list of about 850 titles in Texas libraries that he finds to be problematic. They include more LGBTQ-related books, even a Pulitzer Prize winner. But his detractors say the content of these books are not pornographic nor obscene, but educational for a very vulnerable subset of students who often feel unseen, sometimes bullied, with few resources for help. And they say these are actually books that most students, your average student, wouldn't even be looking for in the library.
Yeah, what's the next step? Where do we go from here?
Well, our colleague Maggie Glenn, she reports that the TEA hasn't really set a timeline for when and how the governor's request could be carried out. We should point out that the TEA commissioner is an Abbott appointee. Last week, I also reached out to the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, one of the agencies in the governor's directive, and they told me they would be cooperating with the governor. Now, what exactly that entails, Josh, well, that remains to be seen.
So you talked about the politics. Filing is underway now for the primaries. We know anyone posing a threat to the governor in March?
Yeah, well, he's facing a primary challenge for the first time as governor, and there are 2 key names right now. You've got Don Huffines, a former state senator from Dallas, very conservative leaning. He has also been very vocal in his criticism of Abbott, going back to the state lockdowns early on during the pandemic. Last month, when Abbott reversed course and he issued an executive order prohibiting private businesses from requiring COVID vaccines, that came after Huffines made a big deal about it. Now, the other challenger is former Texas GOP Chair Allen West. His hill to the governor's mansion, it's a little bit steeper to climb. He only moved to Texas in 2015. Before that, he was a congressman in Florida and a member of the Tea Party. Now, chatting with Jim Henson from the Texas Politics Project and also another political professor, Dr. Richard Pineda at UTEP, UT El Paso, their reads right now, even with Abbott's approval ratings a little bit lower than they were headed into the 2018 cycle, they think that he actually looks pretty safe headed into 2022, at least in the primary.
All right, politics reporter Daniel Marin, thank you for joining us.
The deadly tragedy at a music festival in Houston leads to a new state task force on concert safety.
I think we can only expect this thing to become more and more of a factor for Texas, and we have to be ready for it.
One member of that group has ideas about what needs to change, how the results could affect music fans in Texas.